Hey everyone! With all the other content we have to cover in class this semester, it can sometimes be difficult to nail down the finer details of core media concepts. To help with that, and to help with the visual learners like myself, I've decided to create a short video series to explain, visualize, and compare some of the more important and arguably more abstract concepts from our readings. However, this is not an excuse to skip the readings. It's intended to supplement and help clarify the concepts in the readings and lectures. In today's video, or episode if you will, I will be comparing series, serials, and the concept of seriality. We first encounter these program formats with radio, but they're both used in film and television, though more so in the latter. Later in the semester, we will revisit both of these concepts when we consider transmedia narratives and media convergence. For now, though, let's just start with the definition. As Michelle Hilmes notes, a series is a continuous episodic program with an ongoing situation and characters, but with a plot that usually reaches closure at the end of each episode or set of episodes. Now, the key elements we need to extract here and consider are episodes, continuation, plot, and closure. Let's start with episodes. So an episode is an independent, standalone incident or period considered in isolation, or each of the separate installments into which a serialized story or radio or television program is divided. Now, all of that boils down to the concept of an individual unit, which I will represent here with a single box. The next part of the definition is continuation. Series are comprised of continuous episodes, not individual episodes. So something that is continuous is therefore ongoing, characterized by continuity, having its parts in immediate connection, connected, unbroken. So we can represent that here with a couple of boxes in a row. The next element is plot, which refers to the main events of a play, novel, movie, or similar work, devised and presented by the writer as an interrelated sequence. The concept of an interrelated sequence here is important. If you recall from Hilmes's definition, series are connected by characters and situations, which you can see at the bottom here, but also by the sequence of plot, which we will represent with an arrow up top. Last but not least is the concept of closure. Closure refers to having a definite and final ending, that which defines a closed narrative form, as opposed to the structural openness of something like a soap opera. So that finality is like drawing a line in the sand. So I will add a line here at the end to represent that. Now that we've broken down and visualized all of the key elements of a series, let's go back to the definition. Here she notes that plot closure is reached at the end of each episode. Because of that, I'll adjust our diagram a little bit. We can see here that episodes are continuous and connected by peoples and situations, but that the plot is closed in each episode. An example of a series then would be something like the Jack Benny program, I Love Lucy, Law and Order, or Friends. Now let's move on to the next concept, which is the serial. As Hilmes explains again, it is a continuous episodic program with a plot that carries over from episode to episode, whether for a fixed duration or as an open-ended narrative that may run for years or decades. So some of this is familiar, right? Especially this first part here about a continuous episodic program. Since series and serials have that in common, part of our first diagram still applies. However, there are some key differences, namely, a plot that carries over or is sequential, and a narrative that is open-ended. So let's start with sequence. Sequence is the fact of following after or succeeding, the following of one thing after another in succession, and a continuous or connected series of things. Unlike the series, episodes flow in a specific order, or sequence. The next element of the definition is one of the core concepts in media studies, seriality. Seriality refers to continuing a narrative structure from episode to episode and building on the audience's knowledge of the text and backstory through repetition and recall. The need for audiences to know the backstory of a program is key. It allows for a depth of character development and a complexity of narrative that are instrumental in later discussions of transmediality and the development of hyperdiegetic spaces. For now, though, just note that the narrative or plot carries over from one episode to the next, as I've depicted here. The last element of the series is the open-ended narrative, which is the opposite of closure. It is a structural openness in which the ending, the narrative closure, is constantly deferred. The series deferral means that the plot is rarely resolved at the end of an episode, or even at the end of a season. The plot instead carries on forward into a projected future. Now that all leads us back to the definition, which our diagram illustrates. However, there's another level of possible connection here, which is the long narrative arc. For example, on the television series Buffy the Vampire Slayer, there's often one main villain for an entire season. So that one big bad is a narrative arc that stretches the entire season. In addition to Buffy the Vampire Slayer, there are other examples of a serial, including comic books, soap operas, and television shows like Lost, The Sopranos, or Survivor. On this last slide here, we can see both diagrams together in order to better compare and contrast the series and the serial. They both have continuous episodes, they're both continuous episodic programs, and they're both connected by characters and situations. However, where series episodes can be understood out of order, serial episodes need to be experienced in sequence because the plot carries over from one episode to the next. Also, where series are closed, serials are encouraged to have an open narrative. So these differences and similarities are hopefully clarified by these diagrams. Hopefully the comparisons and diagrams together have helped clarify the concepts in general for you. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to email me or visit me during my office hours. Otherwise, happy studying!